welcome to Old Scary World. Tonight is part 2 into our dive on China in the Old World, and I've managed to find some more photos that I find interesting, so we'll just kind of stay in the vein of the first installment. So here we have 3 elder Chinese men, and they look about what we're told they should be looking like. But the interesting thing is that they also look a lot like what we're told some of the Tartarians look like. But then at the same time, they don't look like the Tartarians. So that kind of brings us to another question: is who are the Tartarians, and were they a multi-ethnic group of people? In other words, to say that their empire spanned so far that the phenotypes and ethnotypes would have extended beyond stereotypical definitions or characteristics? And did their wisdom and their knowledge span that far as well? And when we talk about Tartaria, are we really just talking about the old world? Perhaps there are other names, other civilizations that we don't even know the names of, and then we just lump it into Tartaria. Obviously, there's been speculation that that may be the case. Here we have some more warrior, fighter type men here, looking a little bit more like what we would think of when we think of Mongolian, perhaps. But nonetheless, what I found this in was a source of images that were labeled Chinese, and specifically the Peking area. And a lot of the photos tonight will be from the Peking area of China. Here we have an example of a mud flood, or at least a mud flooded alley here. So we can kind of surmise from a photo like this how we could see how this could happen anywhere in the world. And then obviously, there was people who had to live with this every day of their lives, these kinds of conditions. You see a woman sticking her head out of the window here. Okay, so we know that it's possible. We can see here where the mud would have gone up to and it receded, and this was probably more or less a cycle of things going back and forth, depending on how severe the flood was. And here we have a curious kind of structure here, and the way that it ascends up here, goes up here, then we have another one back here. Perhaps remnants of something greater, and you think about how this was built. It's here on the side of the mountain here. Very interesting. Like a kind of a fortress here. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a higher res, but that's the way that goes. And we have part of the Great Wall. And what I found was interesting here was down in this area here, there's some kind of little tents or things. I'm not exactly sure what this is. Something like vehicles. It's hard to say exactly, but nonetheless very interesting. I have a dragon statue. We find dragons throughout the old world and the new world in almost all the continents. Seen as guardians, seen as protectors sometimes friends, sometimes adversary. Sometimes in certain philosophies it's seen as something that's inside of all of us that we must tame and that we must learn how to use properly. And it's a kind of a balance of the chi kind of thing, kind of Eastern philosophy. But nonetheless, we see one here. Who knows how old it really is. It's not super relevant, but nonetheless I found it interesting, so I thought I'd include it. Okay, here we have another one of these bridges. Now this was in the first video in part 1, and I included this one because to me it's just really aesthetically pleasing, you know, and it does have this certain old world charm to it, almost like a portal or a gateway. And you know, despite whatever the origins of these things might be, it's still very interesting to see the kind of detail and the kind of, I don't know, it's just, there's a certain vibe to these photos, you know, and when you see something like this, it just all kind of comes together, and it's a nice photograph, and it kind of, at least for me, it kind of, you know, spurs my imagination, so to speak. So we can imagine what it would be like to be standing here looking at this in real life and just taking the beauty of it. Okay, so the reason I include this photo is because it's another example of neglect and decay. Okay, so we have this great wall, you know, we're told that it took, centuries to build, all this stuff, you know, countless man hours, all this material, lives lost, all this stuff, and you don't think that they could keep it up a little bit better than this. I find that very interesting when we study these photographs of old ruins and remnants of civilizations, is the amount of neglect that happens over the years. And you know, to me that just seems like, and this is just my opinion, that is an example of a reset or some type of cataclysm that would force people to abandon it and no longer care for it, or for inheritors to come in who don't have the appreciation for it because they didn't have to build it, or their culture didn't build it, so they don't have the same amount of respect for it. So that's just my little opinion on that, regarding neglect and decay. There's another example of that to a certain extent here, where we see these remnants, and we see that it's the same kind of, it's almost like the same kind of construction with a little bit different artistic detail. We can see the Eastern aesthetics here, but then we still see kind of the Romanesque Greek kind of aesthetics to it too as well, the columns. That could be like a universal thing. Not exactly sure what this was, but it's almost like it was taken apart, but it was taken apart carefully, but then it's very confusing. Like these are like pieces here. So if anybody knows any more about this, you can leave it in the comments. I'm not too sure about what this is. And I look back here, we can see maybe these are missing, you know, parts and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it seems like it was deconstructed, but not demolished. Like it was taken apart carefully. All right, here we have another example of decay. Obviously, some people say this is from, you know, a war or some type of battle or something like that, some type of artillery damage or something like that. Possibly, I don't know. But to me, when we're going through these old photographs of the old world or the 1800s or early 1900s, I think that every little bit of information counts. It all kind of goes into the pool. It all kind of goes into the collective, you know, database of research. So regardless, I mean, there's some writing here, but it's illegible, at least to my eyes. If I zoom in, it doesn't really get any better. You can barely make it out. If anybody knows, feel free to leave it in the comments, obviously. I believe this is in Peking. That's all I know. Here's another one here, doorway, Yun Bing Young. Okay, so we see the same amount of that, and this is it damaged, so we can imagine what it was like when it was newly constructed. It's probably even nicer. But yeah, see here, Peking. Okay, what is that? 1877. Okay, so we see the detail here. You You know, like I said, it was probably better in its heyday, and I see this guy chilling. Okay. Now, obviously, you know, this could be the result of some type of war, some type of battle, like in the previous image. Not sure what the official story on this one is, but all I know is we see this kind of devastation to these old world buildings all over this realm at this time, in Europe, in North America, here in China, and it just seems like there has been a calculated effort to destroy buildings of historical value. You know, whenever the opportunity arises, it seems like that's actually a target beyond the, you know, infrastructure damage or the lives lost, but it just seems like it's a purposeful tactic by someone or some entities to destroy buildings of historical value. You can research that as a form of a strategy in warfare, but there's obviously evidence to support that theory, that the enemy or the civilization is hurt psychologically by the destruction of its history. Okay, then we have another example here, and these photos just have like a different vibe to them rather than the ones in North America and Europe, because in the East, you know, there's a shroud of mystery, and they have similarities to the Roman, quote, Roman buildings, you know, Roman concrete kind of buildings, but then at the same time there's this Eastern flair to it. And I've always said that the resets that have occurred in North America and the resets that have occurred in Europe are different than the ones that occurred in Asia. So with that said, you know, if anybody knows more about Asian resets and Asian, you know, kind of stuff like that, because when we talk about Tartaria, obviously Mongolia, Siberia, Russia comes to mind, but there's also been a lot of research saying that Tartaria extended to North America. So were there other civilizations besides Tartaria? You know, and then we get into that question. In other words, was Tartaria China, or was there another ancient civilization in what's now China? Okay, because I'm seeing a lot of different things going on here. We don't see this kind of stuff in North America. Okay, so is it Tartarian because the buildings that we have in North America don't resemble these buildings? So that thought occurred to me, where there was kind of a fly in the ointment in the research, because if the North American buildings obviously we don't have anything like this. Okay, when we go back to this, we don't really see stuff like this in San Francisco and New York and Chicago. We see more of what we're typically you know, the European. So I'll probably get into that in a different video, but to me it seems like there may have been more than one ancient civilization in the East at the time of Tartary, but we'll see. I'll have to do some more research. Okay, so here we have some ruins here, and this was, you know, fortunately this is a pretty high res, you know, photo. We got an entrance to a cave here. We got all these little doohickeys here, maybe like little windows or things, and it just stretches on for quite a while. And some more kind of here, and these are kind of like clay adobe kind of, you know, structures, but this is what's left. You know, obviously this isn't what it was, this is just what remains. So, you know, and this is in China. This is another example of obviously very old civilization in China, and seemingly just abandoned for whatever reason. Obviously it probably didn't look like this when the people were there, because where would you grow the food and so on and so forth, you know, because as we know, you know, environments change, things change, resets occur, things melt, things burn, you know, people come in and change the regime. But nonetheless, I thought it was an interesting photograph. Okay, so these are stereoscopes. These two images are exactly the same, and they were meant to be viewed with these kind of special glasses in the late 1800s, early 1900s. where it would kind of almost be like a 3D effect. So that's why there's duplicates of the image, in case anybody's wondering. But here now we're starting to see something more resembling like kind of a city, you know, more modern kind of city, although it looks primitive. But you can kind of see this guy's elevated here, and then we have these houses here with like an A-frame kind of thing on the roof. Almost kind of like cookie cutter, almost like mass produced, you know, and then he's, you know, standing on some ruins. But these bricks, if you zoom in, there's no mortar. They're just literally just standing here. So is this kind of like a stage thing? You know, is this an example of something like that? Did the mortar dry up from intense heat? You know, but it almost looks like it's not real. Like it was just a stage kind of thing. Like there's no mortar. It's like they're just stacked up. So I thought that was interesting. It says ruins around locations buried by Chinese from Chenmen. Something killed Peking. So like I said, a lot of these photos are from Peking, China. So okay, and then here we have some more examples. And then, you know, the thing with all these photographs, whether they're in North America, they're in Europe around this time, this is, you know, 1901, is you always see these guys just kind of standing around ominously, you know, and you think like there'd be more people here, you know, doing stuff, cleaning things up or whatever, but they're not, which is okay. But the overgrowth, you know, especially over here, okay, and, you know, what exactly is going on here? It says the wall between, oh, what do you know? Tartar and Chinese Peking. So that's the reason why there's a lot of photographs of Peking, is because, and I did this too because I want to kind of help people out in their own research. Peking is on the border of what was considered Tartary. So I think that the city of Peking might be kind of a clue. It might be a good place to look for things, to see if things add up with the timeline. Because as you can clearly see in this photograph from 1901, it clearly says a wall between Tartary and Chinese Peking. Okay, so there we have acknowledgement, at least, of Tartar, Tartary, Tartaria being a separate empire, a separate landmass, you know, as far as, not landmass like geologically speaking, but, you know, territorially speaking. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, this might be a long video. I'm not sure. You know, we'll see how it goes. Chinese Masons work on the new Methodist Mission Church. So we're told that these guys are working on a Christian church here. There's these 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 guys working here with hand tools, some type of frame here. Now it's convenient. It's convenient that it's a close-up shot. And then that this stuff's already built, and then we got some random stuff here like scaffolding. You know, it's kind of like, this isn't doing anything, probably just leaning up against the windowsill. This probably isn't really doing, doesn't look like it's braced, but, you know, nonetheless, it kind of like, it looks like a construction photo. You know, they're kind of like chiseling away here, doing something. Maybe they're doing something, maybe they're not. But to me, it's a little sus, you know, but okay. So this says they're working on a Methodist Mission Church, 1901, is that 1902? 1901 or 1902, something like that. Okay, so, I don't know, it's just interesting. Chinese stonemasons, you know. Maybe not. Okay, here's the Imperial Temple in Peking. Okay. Now this obviously, this looks about right. This is what it should look like. And all this stuff. And then all that, you know, everywhere we go, we see all these great buildings, all this, you know, good stonework, all this stuff. But then always with the dirt roads, you know. But that's just the way it was back then, I guess. You know, they didn't like to have nice roads. Yeah, but sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. It's kind of strange. Okay, Turtle Stone Monument, North China, 1903. Okay, now Turtle Stone, that's interesting because, you know, obviously we have the myths about the turtle, and all that, you know, that the realm is a turtle and shell, and Lemuria in the Pacific Ocean, you know, being the turtle, and all that kind of stuff. So this is from Stereo Travel Co. from Corona, New York City. Corona. So these guys were coming out from New York, you know, to take photos of China, because the East was so interesting back then to Westerners, and a lot of people, they were never going to go there and seen photographs of China. It was like a mystery. It was like this, it might as well have been a different realm. It was just so far out of even the imagination to some people. So this is how a lot of people first saw China. So they sent people out there to take pictures of these ruins and things. Okay, so here we have Curious Calm and Chinese men, gate between gates of Imperial and Forbidden Cities in Peking, China. Okay, so there we have the Forbidden City. Now, that's, you know, kind of like the Vatican. It's kind of like that of the West, you know, the Forbidden City kind of place, at least in some aspects. And then, you know, we know that's the Forbidden City. There's a lot of artifacts, a lot of treasures, a lot of who knows what. So that's very interesting. And once again in Peking. So, like I was saying, you know, a few minutes ago, I think that Peking, China, there's some connection there, and I have to look into that more. Maybe do some more videos specifically on the history of that area. But I think this is a good start. This video will be kind of a you know, prelude to that. So, okay, let's go back. This huge marble soldier, ancient Chinese sculpture on the road to Ming tombs in Nanking, China. Okay, so these are like hogs. These are like wild boars. So it kind of gives us an idea of how big these are. Okay. And then the perspective of the hills in the background also gives us, you know, some type of an idea of how big these are. Okay. And then they're made out of solid marble. Okay, so you have to figure, you know, it weighs a few tons at least, maybe dozens of tons. I'm not exactly sure. It's got to be really heavy. So then the question is, were they carved and sculpted somewhere else, and then they were put here? Was the slab of marble brought out here and they carved it here and left it here? How old are they really? Who built them? How long did it take? All kinds of questions. And that's the interesting thing about historical photos, is a lot of people look at them and they just kind of, they don't think too much about it, but they don't really think about what really went into some of these buildings and statues, like the logistics of it. Like, try to actually put your mind in that of the artist or the builders. Like, how did they do it? So we kind of take that for granted because we have so much stuff to look at. We have so many buildings. We have so much information, but we don't really think about how it was executed and the amount of work supposedly that went into these things. Okay, and here we have another one. Okay, pretty similar. Okay, but this is, you know, clearly different. This guy's got his weapon here on his shoulder. This one's got his hands together. It's clearly not the same one. Totally different facial expression and so forth. Okay, now I don't know if the other ones are the same size. But this gives us a little bit more perspective here. It's because this guy is on a donkey. Okay, this isn't a horse. This is a donkey. And it's stand here. Okay, but he's a little bit forward. So it's about 4, 5, 6, 7, so 8. And it's, I mean, it's really hard to say, but these things got to be at least 12, 15 feet tall. At least, these statues. And then they're probably like, I don't know, you know, probably at least 5 feet wide. Okay, stone soldier in the famous avenue of stone animals. North China. I'm not sure, I can't make that one out, it's a little blurry. But you get the point. Okay. Worshipping a shrine in Fuchao, China. Okay, so then we see classic, kind of thing. But, not a lot of people realize that these old gods, these spirits, these things that people are worshipping, there's a lot of similarities, that would be a whole other video getting into that. But regardless, I thought it was an interesting photograph. I don't want to go on a big, rant about Eastern religion and all that kind of stuff, but save that for a different video. But nonetheless, I thought it was interesting. But once again, same kind of problem we have here, because a lot of people assume that people who research this kind of stuff assume that everything's old. Not always the case. Sometimes things are forgeries, and they're not old. See, I'm not just looking for things that are older than they say. I'm looking for things that are newer than they say. And here I see kind of an example of that with the construction here. It's not up to snuff. Okay, so this is either like a amateur kind of DIY, emergency kind of temple, because we see that the craftsmanship is not the same here. This is like a hodgepodge thing here. They wouldn't do this for something that was like on a grand scale. See how this is all staggered and stuff like that? It almost looks like it was like a repair job because of the discoloration and so forth. And there's no mortar here, and there's like cracks, and this isn't even. You see, this doesn't line up, it's like broken. This is all wonky. Because you gotta remember these two images are the same. This one's just a little blown out here, but they're the same image. So yeah, with that said, this might just be like a, this might not be like a legit kind of thing, but who knows? It's hard to say. Okay, and then here we have another shrine with some stairs. We see that this was split somehow. Now I've seen videos of how they do this, or how they supposedly did it, and they use like metal wedges that they would clink in, and they would do dozens, sometimes hundreds if they had to, if the stone was large, and then they hammer it in, and then eventually you can get it to crack, kind of like a piece of wood when you use like wedges to split wood. So that's always the official story with how they got these rocks, and we see like an example of that possibly. But at the same time, it's hard to believe because we know how hard it is to go through solid stone. But yeah, I do believe that this is the last image of the video. So with that said, I'm sorry it took so long. I'll try to make another video soon. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.